My God, if my father was to see it there, because not a crane in sight, it's all apartments, pleasure boats, which is good I suppose, but not the river that I knew.
All these people moving in here, they don't realise how we suffered, what we went through. I worked in Mark Brown's Wharf years ago. That's where the City Hall is now, all along the river. All our history's gone. It's all become leisure, but there's nothing depicting us anymore.
We could see the cranes at Chambers Wharf and you would see them dip, like come up, go down, and the lorries bringing the stuff to the docks, and the wharves in Pottery Street and Wilson Grove and Bermondsey Wall East were still up and working. I suppose for the dockers it would have been the dying days, the docks being the docks closed in 69, 70, so I kind of remember that.
Spent hours in this park. Used to come in the morning till about 6 o'clock at night, go home, have a bath and into bed.
Bermondsey was like a village. Everybody knew one another. Most of the men worked on the docks. It was a very small, close community. Your family all lived nearby, your aunties and your cousins, and you would play out in the street. Looking back, it was a poor life, but it was a happy life.
We used to run up and down the street, play hopscotch and things. Everybody knew everybody. I think that's what I remember. And we were happy. We had nothing. We were very poor. I mean, I suppose I was lucky in my family that we were never aware of how poor we were. Never. We always had food on the table. We always had shoes on our feet.
Bermondsey was all factories and docks. In fact, unlike today, you knew where you were in Bermondsey by that, but by the smell. Because you walk by this factory, you smelt biscuits. The Pier Stuffs, you smelt custard and jelly. Artley's jam, you smelt jam. The leather works, you smelt leather. Our street was full of leather works.
Atkinson sent perfume, and that was in Grange Road, and that was really nice. You know, can you imagine that? Spraying the whole road with Atkinson perfume. But the one that really was potent, I suppose, it was a bone factory where they made soap. So you get the reverse. You get the lovely smell of the perfume, and then the cooking of the animal bones, of course.
The only shop that I know down there from those days is Mangy's Pie Shop, pie and mash. They used to have the eels outside on the front of the shop in a lead tank, live eels swimming. And somebody walked inside and they'd reach through, pull an eel out, wriggling, chop it to pieces, and the pieces used to jump up and down because it was the nerves. It was the nerves still working. Yeah. But now I don't eat eels myself. Mum did, Mum and Dad did.
Saturday morning, you see all the kids with the prams, and the mum saying, go on, down the gasworks. You just have to go down there with a pram and get your sack filled up with coke, what they called coke for the fire. And that's what we used to have to go and get.
The river was the lifeblood, the biggest employer in the area. I mean, from Tudor times onwards, you may as well say, when you had the legal quays developed and places like the Howland Great Wet Dock was produced and that kind of thing. So export coming in, people needed, very manual labour, needed to load stuff off of barges into warehouse, from warehouse onto horse and cart off to the shops. And so what you had was, whilst the docks and places like Peak Freens, Cross and Blackwell, Pierce Duffs, those type of Paynes Tea, those were kind of big employers as well. Bevington's, the leather works, the leather manufacturers, were large employers.
We used to go down there, get on the barges. Used to like a swim down there, believe it or not. We must have been mad. Because say you fell in at Butler's Wharf, you were taken to hospital and injected. Right opposite, there's a children's swimming pool outside the Tower of London. I mean, what was the difference? The water was clean one side and dirty the other. It didn't make any sense.
My father came from a family of lightermen. His father and his father before him, they were all lightermen. My father had two brothers, they were all lightermen, and their sons all became lightermen. It was a tradition in the family. If I'd have been a boy, I would have been a lighterman.
My father worked in the docks. He was the docker. He talked about the ships and the boats that they used to unload. I mean, all the wharves in Tooley Street, there's butter came from Holland and Belgium. So he'd say it's a Dutch boat. And then it would be perhaps a Russian boat. And each wharf had its own warehouse.
People worked hard. They got here at 6 in the morning. We had to stand on the cobbles. When I was a young man, shall I say, 17 years of age, 18, I used to have to go and knock on a little window. The window would open, there'd be a face behind it, and I'd say, any work today, mate? And they'd go, no work today. You're on the stones, that's what you say, you're on the stones today. But it was an awful place to work, the docks. I used to think it was marvellous because we knew nothing else. I mean, in Butler's Wharf, I think, well, we had loads and loads of warehouses. If I said 30, it might even be more. And some were six stories high and all wooden floorboards and wooden stairs and one toilet.
My dad was just about 5 foot, very tiny man, and my uncles, they were all short. And he could turn a barge, so I've been told. He would stand on the end of the barge, open his raincoat, or his old mac as he called it, and manoeuvre it around, and he could manoeuvre the barge by turning it with the wind. So I don't know how it was done, but he could do that.
I think the historical significance of Bermondsey is definitely its people. Every place is its people. Buildings are buildings, okay, might be a fantastic church, might be a great looking building from outside, but I think without the people inside it, well, Bermondsey coat of arms, Present Gentibus Artis, art profits the people, their sweat, their labour, they created the wealth that came back into it. You know, people, okay, people of my parents' generation, my dad was born in 1927, my mum was born in 1931, both born in Bermondsey, like their parents, hard, tough, but they had to work hard and it had to be tough for them to survive.
There was a period of time when living in Bermondsey and Rotherhithe was really, really hard. it wasn't the most beautiful of places. I mean, I think Alfred Salter, who was the Member of Parliament, once said, you know, it's like one of the ugliest places you could ever live. And of course that drove him and his wife to try and change things by brightening the place up with environmental improvements.
By I think 1922, it becomes a Labour council, solidly Labour. And that's when the likes of the Salters, who have been working in the background, you know, trying to improve people's health, trying to improve the conditions they lived in.
The conditions in the slums were environmentally bad, as well as bad in terms of housing. So Ada Salter had the idea that for those areas where she couldn't immediately replace the slums with new council houses, that those areas could be beautified. So in the 1920s, her beautification committee set about beautifying the entire area of Bermondsey, and it meant that she planted 7,000 trees in a few years, so that every street was lined with trees.
They built the first solarium, Grange Road. They have a health department that went round testing food. Way before Nationally comes in, they had a National Health Service. Because he was a doctor, you see, he sort of really led the movement. Kids with delicate lungs. The solarium, my mum did it. My mum had to do it. She'd walk around ultraviolet lights.
The thing that we used to walk around, it's like a big lamp, but I can only put it that way. It was from the ceiling, it was sort of that shape, sort of, and it was from the ceiling to the floor. And I suppose I was about 4 or 5. And when you got there, they put all Vaseline all round your eyes and big goggles on them, and you walked around and you'd have like a beach ball or something, throwing it at one another as other children, and you got this, what they called a sunray lamp.
Dr. Salter lived in Stalks Road in a big house on towards the end of Jamaica Road, and my mother and father lived further down, only in a flat, mind you, but we used to see as a child Dr. Salter go along the road. He'd have a big bicycle with very high handlebars, and we would play in the street. Hello, Dr. Salter, and he just nodded his head and smiled, you know, and pedal on.
I remember when the war broke out, there was me, Mum, and a younger sister. The other sister stayed in London. They sent us down to a place called Worthing on the coast. We was only there 6 weeks. We thought London was going to be bombed or gassed. Nothing happened, so we came back to London again.
Bermondsey changed. The biggest change was the war. I mean, half of the place, Bermondsey was very badly bombed.
I was at home the first time when the docks got bombed, and we could see that from our bedroom window, all alight, after they dropped the bombs on that Saturday. And my mum wanted me to get an errand for her. You know, when you're children, I don't want to do it. So I said, well, if there's an air raid, I'm not running back. And I was coming down Brunel Road, that's by the tunnel, and all of a sudden the air raids went, the warning went, and I thought, no, I'll teach my mum a lesson, like, you know, I'm not going to run back. And all of a sudden I see my dad come running up Brunel Road. Get home, he said, come on.
It was in September 1940, I believe, when Surrey Docks, which was the biggest timber dock in the country, only a mile up the road there, that was blitzed. And we went to bed that night. I remember going to bed that night. Next thing, the house is jumping up and down. There's flashes everywhere. We've been bombed. We all got pulled out of bed, run through the streets in your pyjamas to a shelter, which was, don't know why, because they could bomb the shelter. So why we went there, I don't know. But that was a terrible night. And Surrey Docks was really blitzed that night. I remember coming back next day and the sky above was crimson, all red, because all the timber was on fire, and the sky was alight with, for miles around, but alight with the flames, all the flames of it. Yeah, that was a bad night. Yeah.
And one day we got a right bashing with the bombs along here. And my mum's running from Swan Lane buildings right down here to see if the walls were still standing. I said, "Where are you going, Mum?" "I know, I got to see if the walls are," because that's where she worked. It didn't bother her. Bombs were dropping, but she had to run along here right from the tunnel down to here to see if her job was still there, you know.
You got used to it. And then you'd get up in the morning and see what was left. And the smell. I can remember the smell. Dirt, dust.
I think everybody's life was difficult after the war because, you know, we were on ration and coupons. But war was over, so people got on with it. You know, they was looking forward. And my husband came out of the army and we managed to get 3 rooms in the house, which we thought was marvellous. And we had the utility furniture. You could only buy certain things on points. People slowly got thinking, oh well, you know, the worst is over now, we've got to look forward.
When we came back in 1945, the German war was over, but the Japanese war was still on. And there were rats running in the streets in Rotherhithe Street because of all the bomb damage on the area. Rats had come up from then, and they were running through the streets until they cleared them all away. Big rats, yeah. You had to keep the front door or the windows shut because otherwise they'd get into your place.
So then I went to school for a year, no, a bit longer than that, and I started work when I was 15. And that was in Towbridge Road, where I was a machinist. Glenley and Hartley, their names were, and it was a nice firm to work for. We used to make the lumber jackets for children and all that. They're really nice people.
I did all sorts of things because I was a regular man, because I'd gone there at 14 and got a regular job. I'd worked with the customs. I'd been a, when you were a boy, sweeper, sweeping up, worked with the customs. I've been a ganger for deliveries.
I was a photo runner. See, the job don't exist anymore. Sometimes you'd go with a man, he'd take a picture, say it was the opening of Parliament, he'd take a camera out, but the camera was about as big as that, and a big flash on the top. Take a picture, take the plate, give it to you, you'd run back to Fleet Street, take it in there, put it into the developing acid, print a lot of pictures, write a caption on the back, give it to the boys, and the boys would run it to every newspaper.
In those days, women didn't go to work. In fact, if you was married, some companies wouldn't employ you. So they would either say they weren't married or they couldn't work. But by the time the war was over, they realised the value of women's work, so that was all sort of forgotten.
And they put me on the Australian fruit, and it was a nightmare. They were boxes of fruit weighing about £60. They were made of bastard wood. You couldn't get nails in them. They had to have a machine to get a nail in. And you used to have to get them off the trolley, get them on your shoulder and throw them till about 10 away. I'll come home, I'd all cuts down here. But some of the jobs were hard.
But in them days, back in the 60s, what happened was there wasn't such a good thing like social security. If you had nothing and you couldn't work because there was no ships there, they'd come down and say, well, you've got to sell the sideboards, you've got to sell the chairs, you know. So what happened was you'd get someone say, can we move your chairs into your house for a while because the fella's going to come down and see if we've got any money.
And a lot of people, they couldn't afford to pay it straight away and they used to have it on tick. And they'd write it in a book, you know, and then the end of the week you'd pay what you'd been having.
We used to go Saturday night, Peckham Co-op, and you go there, it'd be nearly all people from around here down in Peckham Co-op all dancing and meeting the girls, and that was it. But because money was still scarce, my mum used to pawn me suits. So I used to get my suit out to go out over the weekend, go in Monday and it'd be gone back in again.
Well, dockers earned good money. Dockers was on about £20 a week, which was good money in those days. It was good money, but they earned it. I'm not saying they didn't, and they used to buy a lot of suits. See, if you went out for a drink in a pub on a Sunday, you went out with a collar and tie on. You didn't go in a pub like they do these days. Excuse me. They used to wear a collar and tie and put a suit on to go out for a drink.
We had cheese and butter used to come up barge because they couldn't get the big ship up the pool. They couldn't get it up there, so they was unloaded at the big dock in a barge, and barges are brought up to our where we are.
The first thing was containerisation. Don't forget you had 12 men working, yeah, plus us. Sometimes 20 men down an hatch with us, with riggers. And what happened was that you could put everything in a container and do it with 3 or 4 men.
Once you get to the 60s and containerisation comes in, the dock starts dying off.
Well, they just started closing down. I mean, I think it was property developers that were behind it all, but we didn't understand nothing like that, you know.
About 68, 69, if I remember rightly, there was a big meeting in the dock there, and our local MP, Bob Mellish, was standing there, and he said, over my dead body, this dock will shut, telling everyone, you know, he'd keep it open. But strange thing, because what happened was when the dock did shut, he went and worked for the LDDC, the London Dockland Development Corporation, you know. So we all thought, well, that was a big fiddle.
There was suddenly warehouses would close, and we just didn't know what was happening, but we did twig it at the end.
Overnight, everything changed. The whole, you imagine you had 1,000 men working, then suddenly the next day there's nobody. This whole area across the back there, I've still got a couple of pictures of it, was derelict. You could see from here right the way down to the river. All the sheds were being knocked down. You know, it just became, nobody had a job.
The offices that supported the warehouses, they become derelict. The shops close down. People move away. Blocks of flats become derelict because there are people no longer living in them. And so people talk about a mining town where the mine closes and suddenly everyone's out of work. But no one ever said to people around here, you've just lost your livelihood, chum.
It just became desolate. You can imagine the pubs where there was full up every night, they was empty. It changed. The whole social climate sort of started to disintegrate.
In fact, I had a cousin much older than I, and he used to tell various girlfriends that he lived in Bermondsey, because he thought, well, that's better than Bermondsey. Nobody wants to say they live in Bermondsey. He's trying to impress these lovely girls that he'd met. So he lived in Bermondsey, which they thought, oh, lovely, he lives by the sea. But in fact, he lived in Bermondsey in the Thames, you know.
It was the end of an era. This area, completely the end of an era. You know, you could see it. You could see people walking around despondent, you know, no work, nothing to do. You know, when some of them old boys have been in there from the age of sort of 17, 18 to the age of 60 in them days, and then just nothing. You know, it was like the coal mines, wasn't it? You know?
Like I say, the industry's all gone. The smells have all gone, the docks have gone. Well, I barely recognise the place now, I'll be honest with you. You know, I live here, I'm going to die here. But I don't know, it's not the same as it was.
Out of a family that's lived here for a good few hundred years, there's me and my mum. That's it. Everybody else has moved out. They're no longer here.
It was very difficult to actually stay in the area a generation ago. You couldn't find anywhere to live. It was predominantly council housing. And the way the system worked, you were housed on the basis of need. So unless you were very needy, then your chances of getting a place to live in Southwark were not very high, even if you were long-lived, if you had to come from a family that had been in Southwark for generations and generations.
What was happening at that time in London, East London in particular, South East London as well obviously, was Acme Housing Association was starting up, offering very cheap houses, mostly derelict, for the use of artists. So Acme was really the initiator why artists came to live here and other fairly derelict areas.
The site we're on used to actually be a Lido, 50, 60-yard long Lido, a major facility which was in the park, but then the councils were unable to afford to run it, and in the 1980s they started to close the Lido down, and the Lido had a cafe building attached to it. And fortunately, the local artist group, the Bermondsey Artist Group, they said, well, we can make use of that building, don't just knock it down. And they created an art gallery in the park.
The very early exhibition was on the river, which involved a lot of amateur artists who were dockers, who were river painters, effectively. So they would be actually living and working and as painters in very local evening classes, perhaps. They would come and show their work. So the theme was the river.
Private property developers and people wanting a nice home, prior to the closing down of the docks in the 1980s, they would never ever have thought, oh, I must go and find a nice little residence in Rotherhithe or Bermondsey.
It's happened lately. They brought the Jubilee line through here about 8 to 10 years ago, whatever it was, and that's opened the place up. See, you can get in and out of the place much easier than you used to.
Gentrification is a bit of a double-headed coin, really. It's nice when it goes on, but there's the side that it breaks it down. And what they did was, especially the LDDC, where that during period in the 80s, was they build a block of flats, building nice, tend to be very square, no real character to them, glass, that type of thing. But they stick a bloody great wall around them, or a fence, so it's a gated community. They want to live here, but they don't want to be part of it.
But now, I mean, you hear people, oh, Bermondsey, yeah, because there's people moving in Bermondsey now that's got money and having all these big houses built that's worth a lot of money. And that was never Bermondsey. But there you are, that's it.